Sometimes it's more important to be cool than good. And I think Joe Namath might be, Danny, safe to say Joe Namath way cooler than good?
Yeah.
Guy was wearing fur coats on the sideline.
Fur coats, good looking.
People loved that back then, though, too. Like, people loved... Think about the sports culture back then. If Muhammad Ali predicted a knockout and he got it, man, the legend grows.
Yeah.
Like, he predicted
there was
the
no
victory.
social media. There was it's like the legend of Joe Namath predicting and guaranteeing a victory in a Super Bowl where they were huge underdogs.
We're too young to have seen him play, but looking at his stats and seeing all those interceptions, he must have been a Brett Favre type gunslinger.
Yeah.
I mean,
Danny, I think
I'm curious if any listeners old enough where you saw him play.
Yeah, but he had a persona about him.
That's
like
what it was,
said,
though.
He had a swag about him. He had a cool nickname. He had all those elements, and then he had this legend that just grew when he predicted the Super Bowl victory.
I'm not saying he shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame, but I sort of am. I mean, like Refrigerator Perry, cool gimmick, right? Remember the fridge? That was like a short-lived fun thing, but we all remember.
It was such a huge moment for professional football that's why he's in. He was in New York, became the toast of the town, so I can understand why he would be in there, because the old adage goes, if you can tell the story of a sport without bringing up that player, then they don't belong in. But if you have to include them in your story to somebody about that league, then they belong in there.
Oh, it's a great story.
That was so well said. That was well said, honestly.
Yeah, it's awesome.
You can't tell the story of Super Bowl history without saying it all started with Bart Starr, Super Bowl I, and then you fast forward. It's like the biggest early Super Bowl memory for a lot of people was the Joe Namath prediction.
The finger wagging in slow motion.
He was the man, more cool than he was great on the field. In fact, he played 13 seasons. 11 of the 13 seasons, he had more interceptions than touchdowns. He only started all 14 games, because back then it was a 14-game schedule. Only 4 times in his 13-year career did he play a full season. So we're talking about a guy that gave the Jets their only Super Bowl.
Yep.
Broadway Joe, cool guy. And let me add one more thing.
And he was still cool and super gracious with welcoming Aaron Rodgers. Offered up the number if he wanted it, right? Like, he was still the face and sort of the welcoming committee of the New York Jets.
And when you look at Joe Namath off the field, we keep saying fur coat because that was such an image we all think of. If you weren't alive then, that's what you picture. If you were a kid of the 80s or 90s,
I was in New York disco dancing.
Joe Namath. Well, let's talk about off the field.
Studio 54.
Dude, off the field, his IMDb, he was in a bunch of movies and on TV. Joe Namath made appearances on everything from Here's Lucy to The Brady Bunch, Sonny and Cher, Dean Martin Show, Love Boat, Fantasy Island, A-Team, Alf, Kate and Allie, Married with Children, The Simpsons. He was pop culture. So, if anything, the idea that Joe Namath was more of a cool figure,
popularity,
and a winner,
very popular player,
than an actual... Let's be honest. Like, if you line up the stats, his stats are probably comparable to someone that you'd be like, no way they're a Hall of Famer.
Danny G was saying, how is Jim Plunkett, who won 2 Super Bowls, not in the Hall of Fame, but a guy like Joe Namath is? Because being cool, you just said it, being cool is sometimes more important.
And
it's memorable.
Jim Plunkett's stats.
It's impactful.
Jim Plunkett's stats and accomplishments, you tell me but he didn't wear a fur coat. And guess where Jim Plunkett wasn't, Danny G?
Yeah,
on Alf and I Love Lucy,
all those shows,
and freaking Love Boat.
I told Ramos if Plunkett had won 2 Super Bowls in New York, he would have been in the Hall of Fame.
Oh yeah,
right away.
Different image to him for sure. And off the air, we were talking about these one-time doozies, and is it all you really need sometimes? Because Rich is convinced that. Well, obviously, Joe Namath wouldn't be who he is.
I'm sorry.
If he didn't win.
I'm sorry. Just to
But
add,
there's guys like OBJ. Like, if he didn't have his one moment, if he didn't have that catch.
Oh, I'm convinced.
Would he have been as marketable and memorable?
Dude, no. Odell Beckham Jr. is a great example of a great NFL player. But if he didn't make a few circus catches
That went completely viral.
That went,
right? That's stuck in our memory.
That one-handed snag in the end zone that seemed like the greatest catch at the time in NFL history.
And he had all those highlight reels to back it up.
And in practice, he was doing that for the fans. Pregame. Odell Beckham Jr. is a guy that's good, but he became more cool than good.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I wanted to add this one thing just to show how Joe Namath is so damn cool. Before we were even born, 1969, following his Super Bowl season, he had the Joe Namath Show. I'm like, what's the Joe Namath Show? The Joe Namath Show, 1969 talk show.
It's a variety show where I was juggling.
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 I say mellow. What do you think?
Struggling.
Joe Namath and Dick Schaap. It was premiered on October 6, 1969. One season, 13 episodes, where he welcomed guests, and it was a variety show.
Jeremy's dad was on the show?
Yeah. So we're talking about a dude that was just a superstar in life. Let's go to Tim in Idaho, who says he's a little older, so he remembers seeing Namath play. What's up, Tim?
Hey, man, I love you guys.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you very much, man.
Where do you want me to start?
Do we have the right assessment that he was cooler than good?
No.
Fair. Tell us
All
why.
right, and then tell us, because the stats would indicate that the guy threw a ton of picks and really didn't have any winning seasons.
And by the way, we want to make it clear that we say these things respectfully. Hey, better than us. We never made it to the NFL.
If I met Joe Namath, I'd shake his hand and
Of
tell him
course.
it's an honor to meet him. I'm not being
That's
a
just
jerk.
our impression or the perspective that we have sometimes. If we're wrong, and
feel free to tell us. Yeah.
and you think you see it differently, by all means, let us know.
Was he like a Favre, Tim, where he took a lot of chances with his passes?
Let me explain that to you, but I got to give you a little foundation.
Yeah.
Don't forget when Joe Namath came to the Jets, he was wanted by the NFL also. This is when we're talking about the merger. And that Super Bowl victory really helped propel the AFL into the merger process, which was accelerated when the Chiefs won the following year. Now, keep in mind, Joe Namath was a very, very good quarterback at Alabama. And so when he was drafted...
Well, he was a first-round pick. You're right. He was a first-round pick.
Winning reputation.
Yep. Now, he had this beautiful 7-step drop that was just unbelievable. Really quick release. And I think the reason why he threw a lot of picks was because he had George Sauer and Don Maynard as his receivers, and those guys were just going deep all the time. And the only reason I say that is because I was raised an Oakland Raider fan, and when we played them, the Mad Bomber, Darryl LaMonica, was throwing it down the field also. And don't forget, Oakland and New York was involved in the Heidi game. If you guys don't know what that is, look it up.
Yeah, that was when they interrupted the TV broadcast, right?
Yeah.
So is it safe to say he was a skillful quarterback, fun to watch, but just didn't play for a good
But
team?
we got to also remember, thanks for the
For
phone
most
call,
of his
Tim.
career.
We also have to remember that back then, even look at Montana stats or Elway, Marino, even gunslingers like Elway or Marino. The numbers average quarterbacks are putting up now are far superior to the elite quarterbacks of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Like, mediocre quarterbacks throw for 4,000 yards
It
now.
was a running league back when he played.
So, look at Montana in his prime. Montana had like 20-something touchdowns with a couple thousand yards. It was a different game. So stats aren't everything. It just seems like Namath cooler than good.
And that's what we're sort of talking out as we go live. The real point of the discussion was to say, hey, man, the guy's 80 years old. Congratulations there. But how the one moment really stands the test of time.
Well, sometimes to be a legend, you need that one moment like a David Tyree catching a ball in his helmet, or a David Freese having a ridiculous postseason for the Cardinals, and he goes down in history as like the hometown hero. Doesn't matter what he did the rest of his career. You made your mark, and I think Danny made a great point, Covino, when he said that if you can't tell the story of that sport without including that person, then they're a Hall of Famer. You can't tell the story of the early AFL, NFL merger and the Super Bowl and the early days of building the National Football League. You can't tell that story without Joe Namath. You can't.
Plus, he was a big star at Alabama under Bear Bryant, which is also one of the top programs in the 60s and stuff. So his name was definitely... It wasn't just a flash pan. It was out there for a while.
So just a cool guy, and he turns 80 today. So as we always say, Covino, always good to pay tribute to people, and they're still with us.
Yeah, happy birthday, Broadway Joe. And like I said,